The dining room looked exactly the same as it always had, same cream-colored walls, same worn oak table, same holiday centerpiece my Aunt Martha had gifted years ago. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I belonged here, that I was truly part of this family gathering. Then my mom looked up from her turkey and said those words I'll never forget, "You're not really family, Elaine." The dining room went silent, even the Christmas music seemed to fade away. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stared at her, my fork suspended midway to my mouth. What? I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible over my pounding heart. Mom dabbed her lips with a napkin and set it down carefully, like she was handling something delicate. "I thought you knew," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I thought your father had told you." Dad's face paled. "Margaret," he said sharply. "We agreed, she's 27, Richard," Mom cut him off. "She deserves to know she's not ours." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not ours. Not family. I looked around the table at my younger brother Kevin, at Grandma Rose, at Uncle Paul, all of them suddenly strangers in some fundamental way I couldn't process. "What are you talking about?" I finally asked, my voice stronger now, fueled by growing anger and confusion. "We adopted you," Mom said simply, as if commenting on the weather. "When you were 6 months old." I shook my head. "No. That's not possible. I've seen baby pictures. I look like Dad's mother. I have the family chin." My hand reached up to touch my face, as if I could feel the features that now seemed like a lie. "We thought it better not to tell you," Dad said quietly. "The adoption agency said it would be less confusing." "Less confusing?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I'm finding out at Thanksgiving dinner, at 27 years old, that my entire life has been a lie, and you thought that would be less confusing?" Mom shrugged, taking a sip of her wine. "Well, it's becoming relevant now." "Relevant how?" I demanded. "Your biological mother has been trying to contact us," Dad explained, shooting Mom a look I couldn't quite decipher. "She's been sending letters for months." "Letters?" I echoed. "Where are they?" Mom waved her hand dismissively. "I threw most of them away. They were quite dramatic." "You threw them away?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Letters? From my biological mother, and you just tossed them in the trash?" "You were better off not knowing," Mom insisted. "She was very young when she had you. Unstable. That's why she gave you up." I pushed my chair back from the table, the legs scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "And you decided that for me? That I was better off not knowing who I really am?" "You know who you are," Dad said, his voice soft but firm. "You're our daughter." I looked at him, this man I'd called Dad my entire life. "Am I? Because Mom just said I'm not really family." Silence fell over the table again. My brother Kevin stared down at his plate, pushing mashed potatoes around with his fork. He'd been unusually quiet through all of this. I suddenly wondered if he'd known all along. "Did everyone know?" I asked, looking around the table. "Was I the only one in the dark?" Grandma Rose reached over and patted my hand. "I've always considered you my granddaughter, dear. Blood doesn't matter." But it did matter. At least to Mom, who was now serving herself more cranberry sauce as if she hadn't just detonated my entire sense of identity. "Why now?" I asked. "Why tell me this now, at Thanksgiving dinner of all places?" Mom sighed, like I was being difficult. "Your biological mother has apparently done one of those DNA ancestry tests. She's been reaching out to distant matches, trying to find you. It was only a matter of time before you might have been contacted directly. We thought it better you hear it from us." "Better I hear it from you," I repeated. "Over turkey and stuffing, with no warning, no privacy, no consideration for how this might affect me." "You're overreacting," Mom said. "We raised you. We fed you, clothed you, put you through college. Most adopted children would be grateful." I stood up, unable to remain at the table any longer. Grateful? For being lied to my entire life? For finding out like this? For having you intercept and destroy letters meant for me? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Where are you going?" Dad asked as I turned to leave. "I need some air," I said, already moving toward the front door. Outside, the November air was crisp and cold, biting at my cheeks as I gulped it down in desperate breaths. My whole body was shaking, though whether from the cold or the shock, I couldn't tell. I sank down onto the front steps, wrapping my arms around myself. 27 years. 27 years of holidays, birthdays, family vacations. 27 years of thinking I knew who I was and where I came from. And all of it built on a lie. The front door opened behind me, and I heard my brother's footsteps. Kevin sat down beside me, not saying anything at first, just offering a silent presence. At 24, he was my closest friend in the family, or what I had thought was my family. Did you know? I asked him, not looking up. He shook his head. No. I swear, Elaine. I had no idea. I believed him. Kevin had never been good at keeping secrets from me. But I'm not surprised, he added after a moment. Now I did look at him. What do you mean? He shrugged, his breath visible in the cold air. Mom's always treated you differently. I used to think it was just because you were older, or because you were more independent. But now, I think maybe she never fully accepted you as her own. The words hurt, but they also made sense. I'd always felt a distance from Mom, a conditional quality to her affection that I never understood. Dad had been different, warmer, more consistent in his love. I'd attributed the difference to personality, to Mom's perfectionism versus Dad's easygoing nature. Now I wondered if it had been something else all along. What am I supposed to do now? I asked, more to myself than to Kevin. What do you want to do? I thought about the letters, discarded and lost. About a woman out there somewhere who had given birth to me, who was now looking for me after all these years. I want to know the truth, I said finally. The whole truth. Not just the parts Mom and Dad decided I should know. Kevin nodded. Then that's what you should do. The front door opened again, and Dad stepped out. Kevin squeezed my shoulder before standing up. I'll give you two some space, he said, heading back inside. Dad sat down in the spot Kevin had vacated. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I'm sorry, he said eventually. This isn't how we planned to tell you. Did you ever plan to tell me? I asked. He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. I wanted to. Many times. When you were little, I thought you were too young to understand. When you were a teenager, I was afraid it would be too much with everything else you were going through. And then, it just seemed too late. It's never too late for the truth, Dad. He nodded, looking older than his 60 years. Your mom, she was afraid of losing you. Afraid you'd want to find your birth parents and that somehow you'd love them more than us. That's not how love works, I said. I know that. But your mom, she's always struggled with insecurity. With feeling like she's not enough. I thought about Mom's perfectionism, her critical nature, the way she always seemed to be seeking validation. It explained some things, but it didn't excuse the lies. Do you have any of the letters? I asked. Any that Mom didn't throw away? Dad hesitated, then nodded. One came yesterday. I intercepted it before your mom could see it. My heart raced. Where is it? In my desk drawer, in the study. I stood up immediately. I want to read it. Dad didn't try to stop me as I went back inside, bypassing the dining room where I could hear Mom's voice explaining something to Grandma Rose. I headed straight for Dad's study, a small room off the living room that had always been his sanctuary. The letter was where he said it would be, in the top drawer of his desk. A simple white envelope with my name written on it, my adopted name, not whatever name my birth mother might have given me. It had been opened already, the flap torn. Roughly. My hands trembled as I pulled out the single sheet of paper inside and unfolded it. Dear Elaine, it began. My name is Julia Reeves, and I believe I am your biological mother. I sank into Dad's leather chair as I read the rest of the letter. Julia explained that she had been 17 when she had me, too young and unprepared to be a mother. She'd named me Rebecca before giving me up for adoption, hoping I would find a family who could give me everything she couldn't. I've thought about you every day for 27 years, she wrote. I've respected the closed adoption agreement. All this time, but with DNA testing now available, I decided to try to find you. I understand if you don't want contact with me, but I wanted you to know that you were always loved and never forgotten. At the bottom of the letter was a phone number and an email address. I read the letter 3 times, tears blurring my vision. This woman, this stranger named Julia, had given me life and then made the painful choice to give me up. And now she was reaching out across the years, not demanding anything, just offering a connection if I wanted it. Dad appeared in the doorway of the study. Are you okay? He asked. I wiped at my eyes. I don't know. I don't know what I am right now. He came in and perched on the edge of the desk. What do you want to do? I looked down at the letter again, at the contact information. I think I want to meet her. Dad nodded, though I could see the hurt in his eyes. I understand. This doesn't change who you are to me, I said, reaching for his hand. You're still my dad. You raised me. You loved me. That matters more than biology. Some of the tension left his shoulders. I've always been proud to be your father, Elaine. That's never going to change. But I need to know where I came from, I continued. I need to understand that part of myself too. I know, he said. And I'll support you, whatever you decide. Even if your mom doesn't. As if summoned by her mention, Mom appeared in the doorway. Her eyes narrowed when she saw the letter in my hand. "What's that?" she demanded. "A letter from my birth mother," I said, not backing down. "The one that came yesterday." Mom's gaze shifted to Dad. "You kept it from me." "It wasn't addressed to you, Margaret," Dad said firmly. "It was addressed to Elaine. She has no right to contact our daughter after all these years," Mom said, her voice rising. "She gave up that right when she signed the adoption papers." "She has every right," I countered, standing up. "And I have a right to know my own history." Mom shook her head. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. One letter, and suddenly we're not your real family anymore." "You're the one who said." "I wasn't really family," I reminded her, my voice shaking with emotion. "Not 10 minutes ago, at the dinner table." "I didn't mean it like that," Mom backtracked, though I wasn't convinced. "I just meant that biologically, I know what you meant," I cut her off. "And maybe you're right. Maybe I'm not really family to you. But that's on you, Mom, not on me. And it's certainly not on Julia." Mom flinched at the name. "Julia," she repeated. "You're already on a first-name basis with her." "That's her name," I said simply. "The woman who gave birth to me. The woman who's been trying to reach out to me, while you've been throwing her letters in the trash." Dad stepped between us, always the peacemaker. "Let's all take a breath here. It's Thanksgiving. We're supposed to be grateful for what we have." "I am grateful," I said. "I'm grateful for the life you and Mom gave me. For the opportunities, the love, the stability. But I'm also angry and hurt that you kept this from me for so long. That I had to find out like this." Mom's expression hardened. "If you're so grateful, then you'll respect our wishes and leave the past in the past. That woman gave you up. We're the ones who raised you." I looked at her, this woman who had been my mother for 27 years, and I felt a profound sadness. "This isn't about choosing between you and Julia. This is about me understanding who I am." "You know who you are," Mom insisted. "You're Elaine Bennett. Our daughter." "I'm also Rebecca Reeves," I said, the name feeling strange on my tongue. "The daughter Julia gave up for adoption. I'm both of those people, and I have a right to know both sides of my story." Mom turned and walked out of the study without another word. Dad sighed heavily. "Give her time," he said. "This is hard for her." "It's hard for me too," I replied. "My whole identity just got turned upside down." Dad nodded. "I know. And I'm sorry we didn't handle this better." I folded the letter carefully and put it in my pocket. "I'm going to email Julia tonight," I decided. "I want to meet her." "Do you want me to come with you?" Dad offered. "For support?" The offer touched me deeply. Despite everything, he was still trying to be there for me. "Maybe. Let me talk to her first, see what she wants." Dad pulled me into a hug, and I let myself be held, drawing comfort from the familiar smell of his aftershave, the solid presence that had been a constant in my life for as long as I could remember. Biological father or not, he was still Dad. Back in the dining room, the Thanksgiving meal had devolved into awkward small talk. Uncle Paul was telling a story about his golf game, while Grandma Rose nodded politely. Kevin shot me a questioning look as I took my seat again. Mom was notably absent. "She's upstairs lying down," Aunt Martha explained when she saw me looking around. "Said she had a headache." I nodded, not surprised. Mom had always retreated when things got emotionally difficult. The rest of the meal passed in a blur. I pushed food around on my plate, not really tasting anything. My mind was elsewhere, wondering about Julia Reeves, about who she was and what she was like. Did I have her eyes? Her laugh? Were there other biological relatives out there, grandparents, aunts, uncles, maybe even siblings? After dinner, I helped with the cleanup on autopilot, scraping plates and loading the dishwasher while the rest of the family moved to the living room for coffee and dessert. Kevin stayed behind, drying the serving dishes I'd washed. "So what happens now?" he asked quietly. "I'm going to meet her," I said. "Julia. My birth mother." He nodded. "Do you want me to come with you?" I smiled at him, grateful for the offer. "Maybe. I'll let you know." "Whatever happens," Kevin said, "I'm still your brother. That doesn't change." I hugged him, suddenly overwhelmed with emotion. "Thanks, Kev." Later that night, in the guest room that had once been my childhood bedroom, I sat cross-legged on the bed with my laptop open. Julia's email address was typed in the recipient field, but I hadn't started writing yet. "What did you say to the woman who gave you life and then gave you away?" Finally, I began to type, "Dear Julia, my name is Elaine Bennett, though I understand. You once called me Rebecca. I received your letter today and learned for the first time that I was adopted. It's been a shock, to say the least, but I would like to meet you and hear your story, if you're still interested. I have so many questions." I paused, wondering how to end the email. Sincerely seemed too formal, love, too presumptuous. In the end, I simply wrote, looking forward to hearing from you, Elaine. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then closed my laptop and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The same ceiling I'd stared at through childhood illnesses, teenage heartbreaks, and college application anxiety. It looked different now, somehow. Everything did. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I sat up, expecting Kevin or Dad. Come in, I called. It was Mom. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, looking uncertain, an expression I rarely saw on her face. May I come in? She asked formally. I nodded, making room for her on the edge of the bed. She sat down stiffly, her hands clasped in her lap. I owe you an apology, she began, her voice tight. What I said at dinner was cruel and untrue. You are family, Elaine. You've always been family. I waited, not making it easier for her. After 27 years of lies, she owed me more than that. I was afraid, she continued after a moment. I've always been afraid that if you knew the truth, you would leave us. That you wouldn't need us anymore. Mom, I said, finding out about Julia doesn't erase 27 years of you being my mother. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the vulnerability behind her usual controlled facade. When we adopted you, I was so happy. We'd been trying to have a baby for years, and the doctors had told me I never would. You were our miracle. I hadn't known that part, that they'd struggled with infertility before adopting me. And then, 3 years later, I got pregnant with Kevin, she continued. It was unexpected, shocking really. The doctors couldn't explain it. And that's when things changed, I guessed, pieces suddenly falling into place. Mom nodded slowly. I didn't know how to handle it. Suddenly I had a biological child, and I was afraid of treating you differently, of showing favoritism. And in trying so hard not to favor Kevin, I think I sometimes went too far the other way. It made a strange kind of sense. Mom's emotional distance, her heightened criticism of me, her different standards for Kevin and me, all of it could be explained by her overcompensation, her fear of favoring her biological child. Why didn't you just tell me the truth from the beginning? I asked. Why all the secrecy? She sighed. It was a different time, Elaine. Closed adoptions were the norm. The experts all said it was better for children not to know, to avoid confusion and identity issues. And then as time went on, it just got harder and harder to find the right moment. There is no right moment to tell someone their entire life has been based on a lie, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Mom flinched. It wasn't a lie. Not the parts that matter. We love you, Elaine. We've always loved you. I looked at her, this complicated woman who had raised me, who had shaped me in ways both good and bad. I know, Mom. But love and truth should go together. She nodded, wiping at a tear that had escaped. I saw you on your computer. Did you? Are you contacting her? Yes, I said simply. I emailed her just now. Mom took a deep breath. I see. This isn't about replacing you, I said, sensing her fear. This is about understanding where I came from, who I am. I know who you are, Mom said, reaching out to touch my face. You're kind and stubborn and brilliant. You're the little girl who made me read Goodnight Moon every night for a year straight. You're the teenager who organized a petition to save the old oak tree at your high school. You're the woman who volunteers at the animal shelter every weekend even though you're allergic to cats. Her words touched me, reminding me that whatever her failings, Mom did know me. She had been there for every milestone, every triumph, every heartbreak. Those things are all still true, I said. Meeting Julia doesn't change who I've become because of you and Dad. I should have told you sooner, Mom admitted. I should have given you those letters. Yes, I agreed. You should have. Can you forgive me? She asked, and I heard the vulnerability in her voice. I'm working on it, I said honestly. It's going to take time. She nodded, accepting this. And this Julia, will you be meeting her? Yes, I said again. As soon as she responds to my email. Mom was quiet for a moment. Would you like me to come with you? The offer surprised me. Really? If you want, she said. Or not. Whatever makes you comfortable. It was a small olive branch, but a significant one. Let me think about it, I said. Mom stood up, smoothing down her skirt with practiced hands. Well, it's getting late. We should both get some rest. As she reached the door, I called after her. Mom? She turned back. Thank you, I said. For telling me the truth finally. Even if it wasn't how I would have chosen to find out. She gave me a sad smile. Good night, Elaine. Good night, Mom. After she left, I checked my email one last time before going to bed. There was already a response from Julia, sent just minutes after I'd emailed her. My heart raced as I clicked to open it. "Dear Elaine," it began. "Thank you so much for reaching out. I can only imagine how shocking today must have been for you. I would love to meet you, whenever and wherever you feel comfortable. I live in Boston now. I moved here from Chicago about 10 years ago, but I can travel to you if that's easier. I've enclosed a recent photo of myself, so you'll know who to look for. I have so much to tell you, but most importantly, I want you to know that giving you up was the hardest thing I've ever done, and not a day has gone by that I haven't thought of you. With love, Julia." Attached to the email was a photo of a woman in her mid-40s with auburn hair and a warm smile. I stared at it, searching for similarities between her face and mine. We had the same eyes, I realized with a start. The same slightly upturned nose. It was like looking at an older version of myself. I touched the screen gently, tracing the outline of her face. This was my birth mother. The woman who had carried me for 9 months, who had made the painful decision to give me a chance at a better life. Tomorrow, I would reply and arrange to meet her. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of reconciling the two halves of my identity, Elaine Bennett and Rebecca Reeves. But tonight, I needed to sleep, to process the seismic shift that had occurred in my life in the space of a single Thanksgiving dinner. As I drifted off, I thought about family, about how it could be both chosen and biological, both nurturing and difficult. About how the truth, however painful, was always better than a comfortable lie. And about how tomorrow would bring a whole new chapter in my life, one I never saw coming, but one I was now ready to embrace. I woke up the next morning to the familiar smell of Mom's blueberry pancakes. For a moment, the events of the previous day seemed like a strange dream. Then I reached for my phone and saw Julia's email again, and reality came rushing back. I wasn't just Elaine Bennett. I was also Rebecca Reeves, daughter of Julia, a woman I'd never met but whose eyes I'd inherited. My stomach churned with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. I'd already replied to Julia's email before going to bed, suggesting we meet in a coffee shop halfway between her home in Boston and my parents' house in Connecticut. She'd responded almost immediately, agreeing to meet me that very afternoon. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house waking up. Thanksgiving weekend had always followed the same rhythm in our family, or what I'd always thought was my family. Friday morning pancakes, then Christmas decorations would come out of storage, and we'd spend the day transforming the house while holiday music played in the background. Would that tradition feel different now? Would everything? My phone buzzed. With a text from Kevin, "You up? Mom's making pancakes, but the tension down here is thick enough to cut with a knife." I smiled despite everything. Kevin had always been good at lightning heavy moments. I texted back, "Coming down. Save me some bacon." I pulled on a sweater and jeans, ran a brush through my hair, and headed downstairs. The kitchen was just as Kevin had described, Mom at the stove flipping pancakes, Dad reading the newspaper at the table, and a silence between them that felt like a physical presence. "Morning," I said, trying to sound normal. Dad looked up with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Morning, sweetheart. Sleep okay?" "Not really," I admitted, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Too much on my mind." Mom slid a plate of pancakes onto the table without looking at me. "Breakfast is ready." Kevin appeared in the doorway, his hair still rumpled from sleep. "Smells good," he said, reaching for the orange juice. "So, what's the plan for today? Decorations as usual?" Mom hesitated, spatula in hand. "I thought we might skip it this year. I'm not really in the mood." In my 27 years, we had never skipped the day after Thanksgiving decorating. Not when Dad had the flu, not when I was home from college with mono, not even the year Grandpa died just 2 weeks before the holiday. "Because of me?" I asked directly. "Because I'm meeting Julia today?" The spatula clattered against the stovetop. "You're meeting her today? Already?" I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee to hide my nervousness. "This afternoon. At a coffee shop in Northampton." "That's awfully fast," Mom said, her voice tight. "You just found out yesterday." "I don't see any reason to wait," I replied. "I've already waited 27 years without knowing she exists." Dad folded his newspaper carefully. "Do you want one of us to go with you?" I considered the offer. Part of me wanted the support, but another part felt this was something I needed to do alone. "Thanks, but I think this first meeting should just be the two of us." Mom turned back to the stove, her shoulders rigid. "Well, I hope it goes well." The words were right, but the tone was all wrong, brittle and forced. I shared a look with Kevin, who shrugged slightly as if to say, "What did you expect?" We ate in awkward silence, the pancakes sitting heavily in my stomach. When I finished, I stood up to clear my plate. "I should get ready," I said. "It's about a 2-hour drive." "Take my car," Dad offered. Yours has been making that noise again. The simple gesture of kindness nearly undid me. Thanks, Dad. Upstairs, I spent too long deciding what to wear, finally settling on a simple blue sweater that brought out my eyes I now knew came from Julia. I applied minimal makeup, brushed my hair until it shone, then stood back and looked at myself in the mirror. Who was I? For 27 years, I'd thought I knew. I was Elaine Bennett, daughter of Richard and Margaret, sister of Kevin, granddaughter of Rose and Herbert Bennett. Now I was also someone else, someone with a whole other lineage I knew nothing about. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Come in, I called. It was Dad, holding a small box. I have something for you, he said, stepping into the room. Something I should have given you a long time ago. He handed me the box, which was about the size of a hardback book. What is this? I asked. Open it, he said simply. Inside was a baby blanket, pale yellow with tiny ducks embroidered around the edges. It was well worn, the fabric soft from many washings. Beneath it was a small envelope. This is what you came with, Dad explained as I lifted the blanket. The blanket and a letter from Julia. The adoption agency gave them to us when we took you home. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper, yellowed with age. The handwriting was youthful but neat, too. My baby girl Rebecca, I want you to know that giving you up is breaking my heart. If there was any way I could keep you, I would. But I'm only 17, still in high school, with no way to support you properly. Your father doesn't know about you, he left town before I even realized I was pregnant. I'm giving you up because I love you enough to want you to have the life you deserve, with parents who can give you everything I can't. I hope someday you'll understand and maybe even forgive me. You are perfect and beautiful and I will love you always. Your mother, Julia. Tears blurred my vision as I carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. She loved me, I whispered. Even then. Of course she did, Dad said gently. How could she not? I hugged the baby blanket to my chest, breathing in its faint scent of laundry detergent and thyme. Why didn't you ever tell me about this? Dad sighed, sitting down on the edge of the bed. The adoption agency advised against it. They said it would just confuse you, make you wonder about a woman you could never know. And as time went on, it just got harder to find the right moment. He paused. Your mom was especially against it. She was afraid of losing you. You wouldn't have lost me, I said. Knowing the truth wouldn't have made me love you less. I know that now, Dad said. I think I always knew it. I let your mom's fears dictate our decisions. I'm sorry, Elaine. I looked down at the blanket again, running my fingers over the tiny embroidered ducks. Did you ever wonder about her? About Julia? All the time, Dad admitted. I wondered if you got your artistic talent from her. Your mom and I are both so practical, but you've always had that creative streak. The observation surprised me. I'd never thought about where my love of painting might have come from. It had always been a bit of an anomaly in our family of accountants and engineers. I should get going, I said, checking the time. It's a long drive. Dad nodded, standing up. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. I carefully placed the letter and blanket back in the box. I will. Downstairs, Mom was washing dishes with more force than necessary, the clatter of plates betraying her agitation. I hesitated in the doorway, unsure what to say. I'm heading out now, I finally announced. She turned, drying her hands on a dish towel. Drive carefully. The forecast said there might be rain. It was such a mom thing to say, so normal amidst all the abnormality, that I almost laughed. I will. For a moment, we just looked at each other, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. Then she surprised me by crossing the kitchen and pulling me into a stiff hug. Whatever you find out today, she said, her voice muffled against my hair, remember that we love you. That we've always loved you. I hugged her back, feeling the tension in her body. I know, Mom. The drive to Northampton was both too long and too short. I'd chosen a small cafe called the Green Bean, neutral territory for this monumental meeting. As I parked Dad's car on a side street, my hands were shaking so badly I had to take several deep breaths before I could remove the keys from the ignition. What would I say to her? What would she be like? Would we connect, or would it be awkward and strained? The questions tumbled through my mind as I walked the short distance to the cafe, my steps slowing as I approached the entrance. Through the window, I could see a woman sitting alone at a corner table. Auburn hair, just like in the photo. She was nervously turning a coffee cup in her hands, glancing up at the door every few seconds. Julia. My birth mother. Before I could lose my nerve, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The warmth and the smell of coffee enveloped me as Julia looked up, our eyes meeting across the room. Her hand flew to her mouth, and I saw tears immediately well up in her eyes. I walked over slowly, feeling as though I was moving through a dream. When I reached her table, neither of us spoke for a long moment. We just looked at each other, taking in the similarities that were now so obvious, the eyes, the nose, the shape of our faces. "Elaine," she finally said, her voice breaking on my name. "You came." "I came," I echoed, sliding into the chair across from her. "I wasn't sure you would," she admitted. "After all this time?" "I almost didn't," I confessed. "I'm still trying to process everything." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I can only imagine how shocking it must have been to find out like that." "I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault," I said automatically. "You tried to contact me. My parents, they kept your letters from me." Julia's hands fidgeted with her coffee cup. "I started writing about 5 years ago, actually. Just once a year, on your birthday. I never expected a response. The adoption was closed, and I'd promised not to interfere. But then last year, my sister did one of those DNA ancestry tests, and it got me thinking." "That's how you found me?" I asked. She nodded. "I did the test too, and started looking for matches. I found a second cousin of ours, who helped me narrow down the possibilities. It took months of research, but eventually I found enough information to locate your adoptive parents." I was struck by her determination, by the effort she'd put into finding me. "Why now? After all these years?" Julia took a deep breath. "Honestly? I was diagnosed with breast cancer last year." My heart sank. "I'm fine now," she quickly assured me. "The prognosis is excellent." But it was a wake-up call. I realized life is short and unpredictable, and I didn't want to die without at least trying to find you, to let you know the truth. A server approached, and I ordered a latte, grateful for the momentary distraction. When she walked away, I turned back to Julia. "My dad gave me your letter this morning," I said. "The one you wrote when I was born." Tears filled her eyes again. "He kept it all these years?" I nodded. "And the blanket? The yellow one with ducks?" "I made that," she said softly. "During the last few months of my pregnancy. I wasn't very good at sewing, but I wanted you to have something from me, even if you never knew it was from me." The revelation touched me deeply. All these years, I'd had something made by my birth mother's hands, a tangible connection to her even when I didn't know she existed. "Tell me about yourself," I said. "I want to know everything." And so she did. She told me about growing up in a small town in Illinois, about getting pregnant at 17 by her high school boyfriend who'd moved away before she even knew. About how her parents had given her 2 options, give the baby up for adoption or get out of their house. About how she'd chosen adoption because she wanted her child, me, to have opportunities she couldn't provide. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," she said, her voice breaking. "Holding you just that once in the hospital, knowing I would never see you again. I've thought about you every single day since then." "What happened after?" I asked. "After you gave me up? I finished high school, got a scholarship to community college. My parents and we never really repaired our relationship. They wanted to pretend the whole thing never happened." She shrugged. "I moved out as soon as I could, transferred to a 4-year university, got a degree in graphic design. I've worked for an advertising agency for the past 15 years. "Graphic design," I repeated, thinking of my own love for art and visual creativity. "I'm an illustrator. Children's books." Julia's face lit up. "Really? That's amazing. I always loved to draw too." The connection, this tangible evidence of shared DNA, sent a thrill through me. "I got that from you," I said wonderingly. "All these years, I thought I was just the odd one out in a family of math people." Julia smiled, and I could see how much the realization meant to her too. "Do you have any of your work with you? I'd love to see it." I pulled out my phone and showed her my portfolio website. She scrolled through the images, exclaiming over details, asking questions about my process, understanding intuitively things that I'd never been able to explain to my parents. "You're so talented," she said, pride evident in her voice. "I always hoped you'd get the chance to develop your abilities, whatever they were." "Did you ever have other children?" I asked. She shook her head. "No. I never married, never had more kids. There were relationships, but nothing that lasted. I think, in some ways, I was always waiting, hoping I might find you someday." The weight of her words settled over me. While I'd grown up not knowing I was missing a biological mother, she had lived every day with the conscious knowledge of what she'd lost. "I have so many questions," I said. "About medical history, about your family, my biological family." "Ask me anything," Julia said. "I'm an open book." For the next hour, we talked about everything: her parents, my biological grandparents, her sister, my aunt, the heart disease that ran on her father's side, the artistic talent that seemed to flow through her maternal line. She showed me photos of relatives whose features I could see echoed in my own face. "You have your grandfather's chin," she observed, showing me a picture of a distinguished older man. "And my mom's hands, definitely." It was surreal to suddenly have these connections, these biological roots I'd never known existed. Like discovering a map to a country I'd never realized I was from. "What about my biological father?" I asked eventually. "Do you know anything about him?" Julia's expression turned somber. "His name was Michael Reeves, no relation to me, just a coincidence that we had the same last name. He was a year ahead of me in high school, left for college before I knew I was pregnant. I tried to find him a few times over the years, but..." She shrugged. "He seems to have disappeared. No social media, no public records I could find." I nodded, accepting this gap in my history. "So I might never know that part of me." "I'm sorry," Julia said sincerely. "I wish I could give you more." "It's okay," I assured her. "This is already more than I ever expected to have." We ordered more coffee, neither of us ready to end this first meeting. As the afternoon light began to fade outside the windows, Julia reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped package. "I brought you something," she said, sliding it across the table. "It's not much, but..." I unwrapped it carefully. To find a small leather-bound sketchbook. Opening it, I discovered page after page of drawings, a baby's face captured in soft pencil strokes, a toddler playing in a park, a young girl with a backpack heading off to what looked like a first day of school. "These are all me," I realized, turning the pages slowly. "But how?" "I imagined you," Julia explained, her voice thick with emotion. "Every year on your birthday, I would draw how I thought you might look, what you might be doing. It was my way of staying connected to you, even if it was just in my imagination." Tears filled my eyes as I looked at these images, this alternate childhood captured by a mother who had loved me from afar. The drawings weren't accurate, of course, the real me had been shorter, with curlier hair, but the love that had gone into creating them was unmistakable. "This is the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me," I said, my voice breaking. Julia reached across the table and tentatively took my hand. "I know I have no right to ask for a place in your life now. You have parents who raised you, who love you. But if you're willing, I'd like to get to know you, the real you, not just the you I imagined all these years." I squeezed her hand, feeling a connection I couldn't quite name, not the comfortable familiarity I felt with Dad or the complicated bond one had with Mom, but something elemental and undeniable. "I'd like that too," I said. As we prepared to leave the cafe, exchanging phone numbers and making tentative plans to meet again, Julia hesitated. "There's something else you should know," she said. "Something I didn't put in my letters because I wanted to tell you in person if I ever got the chance." "What is it?" I asked, suddenly anxious. "The DNA test I did, it showed something unexpected." She took a deep breath. "I have a genetic marker for BRCA1, the breast cancer gene. That's probably why I developed cancer, and it means you might have inherited it too. You should get tested." The information landed with a dull thud in my consciousness. Another piece of my biological heritage, but not one I would have chosen to claim. "Thank you for telling me," I said, trying to process this new reality. "I'll talk to my doctor." We hugged goodbye outside the cafe, an awkward embrace that gradually softened as we held on to each other. She smelled of unfamiliar perfume and yet somehow familiar too, as if some part of me recognized her at a level deeper than conscious memory. "Drive safely," she said as we pulled apart. "And call me when you get home, just so I know you made it back okay." It was such a mother thing to say that I almost laughed. "I will." "And Elaine?" she added as I turned to go. "Thank you for giving me this chance." I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat, and headed back to my car. As I drove home through the darkening evening, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I had a birth mother now, a woman with my eyes and my artistic talent. I had a medical history I'd never known about, genes that might carry both gifts and threats. I had a yellow baby blanket with ducks, made by hands connected to mine by blood. And I had a family waiting for me at home, complicated and imperfect, but mine in all the ways that truly mattered. The road ahead would be complex, navigating these new relationships, these newly discovered parts of myself. But for the first time since that shocking moment at the Thanksgiving table, I felt a sense of possibility rather than loss. I wasn't just Elaine Bennett anymore, and I wasn't just Rebecca Reeves. I was both, and somehow more than the sum of these parts. And that felt like something to be thankful for after all. The house was silent when I returned home that evening. No lights in the living room, no sounds of the TV, none of the usual post-Thanksgiving bustle. For a moment, I wondered if everyone had gone out, but then I spotted the glow from Dad's study. I found him there, reading glasses perched on his nose, surrounded by stacks of papers. "Hey," I said softly from the doorway. He looked up, relief washing over his face. "You're back. How did it go?" I sank into the leather chair across from his desk, the one where I used to sit as a child while he explained math problems I couldn't quite grasp. It was intense, amazing, overwhelming. "What's she like?" he asked, removing his glasses. "She's an artist," I said, a small smile forming. "A graphic designer. That's where I got it from, my drawing, my whole creative side. It's from her." Dad nodded thoughtfully. "I always wondered about that. Neither your mom nor I could draw more than stick figures." "Where is Mom?" I asked, suddenly realizing how quiet the house was. Dad's expression clouded. "She went to stay with Aunt Martha for a few days. Said she needed space to think." The news shouldn't have surprised me, but it still stung. "She's that upset about me meeting Julia?" "It's complicated, Elaine," Dad sighed. "Your mom. She's struggling with a lot of feelings right now. Guilt, fear, jealousy." "Jealousy?" I repeated, confused. "Of Julia," he explained. "Of the connection you might form with her. Your mom has always been insecure about her relationship with you, especially after Kevin was born." I thought about the conversation I'd had with Mom the night before, about her attempts to compensate for having a biological child by being harder on me. But that's not fair. She's the one who kept the truth from me all these years. "I know," Dad said. "And she knows that too, deep down. She just needs time." I nodded, too emotionally drained to feel angry. "Julia gave me something today," I said, reaching into my bag for the sketchbook. "She's been drawing me every year on my birthday since I was born. Imagining what I might look like, what I might be doing." Dad took the sketchbook carefully, as if it were a fragile artifact. He turned the pages slowly, studying each drawing. "She really loved you," he said finally, his voice thick. "All these years." "She did," I agreed. "She does." He handed the sketchbook back to me. "I'm glad you found each other." "Me too," I said. "But Dad, there's something else." I told him about the BRCA1 gene, the breast cancer marker Julia had mentioned. His face grew serious as I explained the implications, the testing I would need, the increased vigilance if I tested positive. "We'll get you the best doctors," he said immediately. "Whatever tests you need, whatever preventative measures are recommended." His immediate support, without hesitation or question, reminded me of why I'd always felt closer to him than to Mom. Dad had always been my safe harbor, the one who accepted me exactly as I was. "There's more papers here," he said, gesturing to the stacks on his desk. "I've been going through all the adoption records, everything we kept. I thought you might want to see them." I moved around to his side of the desk, and together we sifted through the documents, the original adoption papers, health records from my first 6 months of life, letters from the agency. It was strange to see my life documented so clinically, reduced to forms and signatures. "What's this?" I asked, picking up a sealed envelope with the adoption agency's letterhead. Dad frowned. "I'm not sure. I haven't opened anything that was sealed." I carefully broke the seal and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a letter from the agency director, dated just 3 months after my adoption. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Bennett," it began. "We are writing to inform you that the birth mother of baby Rebecca, now Elaine, has inquired about the possibility of an open adoption arrangement. While the original agreement was for a closed adoption, she has expressed a strong desire to receive occasional updates about the child and perhaps maintain minimal contact as the child grows. Please contact our office to discuss whether you would be open to modifying the adoption terms." I looked up at Dad, my heart pounding. She tried to find me. Just months after giving me up, she tried to find a way to stay connected. Dad's face had gone pale. "I never saw this letter. Never." "Mom must have intercepted it," I realized. "She must have hidden it from you." He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly older. "I'm so sorry, Elaine. If I had known." "Would you have agreed?" I asked. "To an open adoption?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes. I would have. I always felt you had a right to know where you came from." The revelation settled over me like a heavy blanket. For 27 years, I could have known Julia. Could have had her in my life in some capacity. Could have understood why I loved to draw, why I saw the world the way I did, why I never quite fit the mold my mother tried to shape me into. All those years, lost. Because of one hidden letter. "I need some air," I said, standing abruptly. Dad nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need." Outside, the night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. I walked aimlessly through the neighborhood, past houses decorated for Christmas, windows glowing with warmth and family gatherings. The contrast with the fracturing of my own family was stark. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Julia. Just checking that you got home safely. Today meant the world to me. Sleep well, and call anytime. Red heart, the simple message, the heart emoji, such normal, maternal concerns. I texted back a quick confirmation that I was safe, then continued walking, my thoughts a tangled mess of emotions. My whole life felt like a carefully constructed lie. Not just the fact of my adoption, but the deliberate concealment of Julia's attempts to maintain contact. Mom had systematically erased every trace of my birth mother, every opportunity for connection, all while making me feel like there was something wrong with me for not being more like her. As I rounded the corner back onto my parents' street, my phone rang. It was Kevin. Hey, I answered. What's up? Are you almost home? He asked, sounding agitated. There's something you need to see. I'm just down the block, I said, quickening my pace. What's going on? A courier just delivered something for you, he said. A package from someone named Julia Reeves. My heart skipped a beat. I'll be right there. I found Kevin in the living room, a medium-sized box on the coffee table in front of him. It came about 10 minutes ago, he explained. Special courier, required signature. Dad signed for it. The box was wrapped in brown paper, my name and my parents' address written in Julia's now familiar handwriting. With trembling fingers, I unwrapped it to find a cardboard box underneath. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a small wooden chest, beautifully carved, with a pattern of leaves and vines. A note lay on top. Elaine, I didn't want to overwhelm you with everything today, but I've been preparing for this moment for years. This is your history, everything I could say for you. With love, Julia. I opened the chest to find it packed with treasures, a lock of auburn baby hair tied with a blue ribbon, a tiny hospital bracelet with Baby Girl Reeves printed on it, ultrasound images from Julia's pregnancy, report cards from her high school years, family photos showing generations of women who shared our features, birth certificates for Julia, her parents, her grandparents, medical records documenting family health history in meticulous detail, and at the bottom, a DNA test report. Julia had already run the test that confirmed beyond any doubt our biological relationship. Next to it was a prepaid DNA kit with my name on it, not for proof, but so I could discover the other half of my genetic heritage, the part she couldn't provide. Wow, Kevin said softly, watching as I carefully examined each item. She really thought of everything. She's been planning this for years, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Collecting all of this, hoping someday she'd find me. Dad appeared in the doorway, his expression a mix of awe and sadness. She's giving you what we should have all along, your history, your truth. I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. What are you going to do now? Kevin asked. It was the question I'd been avoiding since leaving the cafe with Julia. What did I want from this new relationship? How would it fit into my existing life, my existing family? And what about Mom, who had gone to such lengths to keep Julia away from me? I don't know, I admitted. But I think I need to talk to Mom. Dad nodded. Martha's place is about an hour away. You could drive over in the morning. No, I said, making a sudden decision. I'm going now. Kevin raised his eyebrows. It's almost 10 o'clock. I don't care, I said, standing up. This has waited 27 years. It's not waiting another night. Dad didn't try to talk me out of it. Instead, he simply handed me his car keys again. Drive carefully. The drive to Aunt Martha's house gave me time to organize my thoughts, to process the whirlwind of revelations from the past 2 days. By the time I pulled into her driveway, my initial anger had cooled into something more purposeful. I wasn't here to punish Mom, but to understand, and to be understood. Aunt Martha answered the door in her bathrobe, surprise evident on her face. Elaine? What are you doing here so late? I need to talk to Mom, I said simply. She hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. She's in the guest room. First door on the left upstairs. I found Mom sitting on the edge of the bed, a photo album open on her lap. She looked up as I entered, her eyes widening. Elaine? What's wrong? Did something happen? A lot has happened, I said, closing the door behind me. Too much to process over the phone. She closed the album, setting it aside. I could see it was filled with photos of me as a baby, as a toddler, growing through the years. You met her today, Mom said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, sitting down in the armchair across from the bed. Her name is Julia. She's an artist. That's where I get it from. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't say anything. She gave me a sketchbook, I continued. She's been drawing me every year on my birthday, imagining what I might look like, what I might be doing. She never stopped thinking about me, Mom. Never stopped loving me. Mom looked away, her hands twisting in her lap. I'm sure she didn't. She tried to contact me when I was just a few months old, I said, watching her carefully. The adoption agency sent a letter asking if you and Dad would consider modifying the terms, allowing some kind of open arrangement. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with alarm. How did you? We found the letter tonight, I said. Dad never saw it. You hid it from him, just like you hid Julia's recent letters from both of us. Mom's shoulders slumped. I was protecting our family. No, I said firmly. You were protecting yourself. Your idea of family. Your control over who I was allowed to be. Her eyes flashed with anger. That's not fair. I raised you, Elaine. I loved you. In your way, I acknowledged. But you never accepted me for who I really was, did you? You were always trying to make me more like you, more like Kevin. And when I didn't fit the mold, you blamed me instead of considering that maybe I was just different because I came from different stock. Mom was silent for a long moment. I was afraid, she finally admitted, her voice small. Afraid that if you knew about her, you'd love her more than me. That you'd choose her over me. It was never about choosing, I said. Love isn't a finite resource, Mom. I could have loved both of you, in different ways. I see that now, she said, tears welling in her eyes. But back then, I was so insecure. When we adopted you, I thought I'd never have a biological child. Then Kevin came along, and I was terrified of showing favoritism, of loving him more because he was mine in a way you weren't. I overcompensated, pushed you harder, expected more from you. And in doing so, made me feel like I was never quite good enough, I said quietly. She nodded, tears now flowing freely. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was being fair. And the letters? Julia's attempts to contact me? Was hiding those fair? Mom wiped at her tears. No. That was selfish. I was protecting my place in your life, not you. I took a deep breath. A courier delivered a package tonight. From Julia. Mom's body tensed. What was it? My history, I said simply. Everything she could say for me, baby hair, hospital bracelet, family photos, medical records. 27 years of collecting and preserving pieces of who I am, where I came from. She even included a DNA test kit so I can discover the other half of my heritage. I see, Mom said, her voice barely audible. She has the BRCA1 gene. I continued. The breast cancer marker. She's already had cancer once. I might have it too. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, Elaine. If I'd known earlier, I could have been getting screenings. Taking precautions. But I didn't know, because you kept her from me. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Mom's face crumpled as the full weight of her actions hit her. I never meant to put you at risk, she whispered. I never thought. I know, I said, softening slightly. You couldn't have known about the genetic risk. But that's the thing. About secrets, Mom. They have consequences we can't predict. She nodded, looking down at her hands. Are you going to keep seeing her, Julia? Yes, I said without hesitation. She's part of who I am. A part I've been missing all my life without even knowing it. Mom looked up, vulnerability etched across her face. And what about me? About us? It was the question I'd been dreading, yet knew I had to answer. I don't know yet, I said honestly. I love you, Mom. You raised me. That doesn't disappear overnight. But I'm angry too. You took something precious from me, the chance to know my birth mother, to understand myself better. That's going to take time to work through. She nodded slowly, accepting this. I understand. Do you? I pressed. Because I need you to really hear me, Mom. This isn't about you anymore. It's about me figuring out who I am, putting together all these pieces that have been scattered and hidden. And I need you to support that, even when it's hard. Even when it means acknowledging that what you did was wrong. I'm trying, she said, her voice breaking. I'm really trying, Elaine. I believed her. For perhaps the first time, I saw my mother as she truly was, not the perfect, controlled figure of my childhood, but a flawed, insecure woman who had made mistakes out of fear. Julia wants to meet you, I said, surprising both of us with the words. She said she'd like to thank you for raising me, for giving me opportunities she couldn't have. Mom's eyes widened. She said that? After everything I did to keep her away? I nodded. That's the kind of person she is. Generous. Forgiving. I don't know if I can, Mom whispered. Face her, knowing what I did. Think about it, I said, standing up. Not for her sake, or even for mine. But for your own. Because carrying this guilt and fear around isn't helping anyone, least of all you. Mom looked up at me, something like wonder in her expression. When did you get so wise? Maybe I always was, I said with a small smile. You were just too busy trying to make me like you to notice. The words could have been cruel, but I said them gently, and Mom nodded in acknowledgement. Are you going back to Dad's? She asked as I moved toward the door. Yes, I said. I'll be there until Sunday. After that, I'm going back to my apartment in Boston. I hesitated. Julia lives in Boston too. Just a few neighborhoods away from me, actually. I'm going to see her again next week. Mom absorbed this information with a small nod. Will you let me know how it goes? It was a small overture, a tentative reaching out. I will, I promised. I felt as though I'd crossed some invisible threshold, not into resolution, exactly, but into a new understanding of my complex family dynamics. When I arrived, the house was dark except for a single light in the kitchen. I found Dad there, nursing a cup of tea, clearly waiting up for me. How did it go? He asked as I slid into the chair across from him. Better than I expected, I admitted. We talked, really talked, maybe for the first time ever. And it's a start, I said. Not a solution, but a beginning. He nodded, understanding. These things take time. Dad, I said, reaching for his hand across the table. Thank you. For being honest with me when I asked. For supporting me through all of this. He squeezed my hand, his eyes suspiciously bright. You're my daughter, Elaine. Biology or not, that's never going to change. I know, I said, and I did. Whatever complications Julia's presence in my life might bring, whatever revelations might still be waiting in the DNA test or in future conversations, Dad's place in my heart was secure. Upstairs in my childhood bedroom, I carefully unpacked the wooden chest Julia had sent, arranging its contents on my desk. Each item was a thread connecting me to a past I'd never known, to people whose blood ran in my veins. I picked up the DNA test kit, turning it over in my hands. With it, I could potentially find my biological father, complete the genetic puzzle of my heritage. But it might also confirm the BRCA1 gene, the shadow that had fallen across Julia's health and might now threaten mine. Knowledge was a double-edged sword, revealing and concealing, healing and wounding. Yet after 27 years of living with hidden truths, I knew I would choose knowledge, however painful, over comforting lies. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia, thinking of you. Hope the package arrived safely. No pressure to use anything. Right away, it's all yours to explore whenever you're ready. Her consideration, her patience, they were gifts as valuable as the chest of memories. She wasn't pushing her way into my life, she was simply opening a door and waiting to see if I would walk through it. I texted back, got everything. It's beautiful. Thank you for keeping all of this for me. I'm going to take the DNA test tomorrow. Her reply came quickly, whatever you discover, remember you're not alone anymore. I'm here. As I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror, the eyes that were Julia's, the chin that came from her father, the artistic talent that had flowed through generations of her family before finding expression in me. For the first time in my life, I could see myself clearly, not just as Elaine Bennett, daughter of Richard and Margaret, but as a human being connected to a broader tapestry of genetics and history. The knowledge didn't diminish my relationship with my adoptive parents, it simply added new dimensions, new understanding. Whatever tomorrow brought, Mom's return or continued absence, the results of the DNA test, the evolving relationship with Julia, I felt prepared to face it. Not because I had all the answers, but because I was finally asking the right questions. I was no longer living someone else's version of my story. I was writing my own, page by page, truth by truth. And that felt like the most precious gift of all, the freedom to be fully, authentically myself. 3 months later, I stood in the doorway of my Boston apartment, watching as Julia hung a framed illustration on the wall, one of my own designs, a watercolor of a little girl releasing a handful of butterflies into a summer sky. It had been published in my latest children's book, Finding Home, a story about belonging that had practically written itself in the weeks after Thanksgiving. Perfect, Julia declared, stepping back to admire the hanging. It catches the light. Exactly right. I smiled, still getting used to the way she noticed these things, the play of light, the harmony of colors, the small artistic details that my adoptive parents had never quite grasped. It was like discovering a language I'd always spoken without knowing its name. The editor wants 3 more illustrations by next Friday, I said, bringing 2 mugs of tea into the living room. I'm thinking of changing the color palette for the dream sequence. Julia accepted her mug with a thoughtful nod. Maybe shifting toward purples and deep blues? It would create that ethereal quality you're looking for. Exactly what I was thinking, I said, feeling that now familiar thrill of connection. It had been 12 weeks since that earth-shattering Thanksgiving revelation, 12 weeks of rebuilding. My understanding of family, of identity, of belonging. Julia and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm, meeting once or twice a week, for coffee, for museum visits, for long walks along the Charles River where we talked about everything and nothing. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Kevin's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, big brother," I answered, putting him on speaker. "You're on with me and Julia." "Hi, Kevin." Julia called out, her ease with my family still surprising me sometimes. "Hey, Julia," he replied warmly. "Just calling to confirm Sunday brunch. Mom's making her famous Belgian waffles." I glanced at Julia, who gave me an encouraging nod. "We'll be there," I confirmed. "Should we bring anything?" "Just yourselves," Kevin said. "Dad's excited about the DNA results. He's been reading up on genetic genealogy." "Of course he has," I laughed. "Tell him not to create any family tree charts before we get there." After we hung up, Julia looked at me with a hint of concern. "Are you sure you're ready for this? All of us together?" I took a deep breath, considering the question. The DNA results had arrived yesterday, a comprehensive report that not only confirmed the BRCA1 gene from Julia's side but had also revealed unexpected connections on my biological father's side. Third and fourth cousins I'd never known existed, ancestry that spanned continents and centuries. "I think so," I said finally. "It's time." The journey to this moment hadn't been easy. After returning to Boston in December, I'd thrown myself into research about adoption, about genetic inheritance, about family systems and how they adapt to change. I'd also started therapy, trying to untangle the complex emotions around my mother's deception and my new relationship with Julia. Mom had returned home 2 days after our late-night conversation at Aunt Martha's, subdued but determined to make amends. The Christmas holiday had been awkward, fragile, everyone walking on eggshells as we navigated this new family dynamic. But there had been moments of genuine connection too, Mom asking to see Julia's sketchbook, Dad sharing stories from my childhood that Julia had missed. The real breakthrough had come in January, when Mom had finally agreed to meet Julia. I'd arranged lunch at a neutral restaurant, terrified of how it might unfold. The initial moments had been excruciating, both women stiff with anxiety, making painfully polite small talk. Then Julia had pulled out a small gift box and slid it across the table to Mom. "What's this?" Mom had asked, suspicious. "Just something I thought you might like to have," Julia had explained. Inside was a beautiful silver frame containing a photograph I'd never seen before, a newborn me, just hours old, cradled in Julia's arms in a hospital bed. Her face was younger, tear-stained, gazing down at me with a mixture of love and heartbreak. "This is the only photo I have of her from that day," Julia had said softly. "I thought you should have it to complete your collection." Mom had stared at the photo for a long moment, tears welling in her eyes. "Why would you give me this?" she'd asked, her voice barely audible. "Because you raised her," Julia had answered simply. "You gave her the life I couldn't. And despite everything, I'm grateful for that." It hadn't fixed everything, years of deception and insecurity couldn't be erased with a single gesture. But it had opened a door, created a space where healing could begin. Now, as Julia and I prepared to share the DNA results with my family, with both my families, I felt a curious sense of peace. Whatever the test revealed about my biological father, whatever medical vigilance the BRCA1 gene might require, I was no longer facing it alone. "Penny for your thoughts?" Julia asked, interrupting my reverie. I smiled. "Just thinking about how much has changed since Thanksgiving. How much I've changed." "For the better, I hope," she said. "Definitely," I nodded. "I feel more complete. Like I finally have all the pieces of myself." Julia's expression softened. "That's all I ever wanted for you. To know yourself, all of yourself. Even the complicated parts," I agreed. And there were certainly complicated parts. The DNA test had revealed that my biological father wasn't entirely unknown after all. He had died young in a car accident, but not before fathering 2 other children with different women. I had half-siblings out there somewhere, sharing my genes if not my history. I hadn't decided yet whether to try to find them. One revelation at a time seemed wise. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect spring Sunday. Julia arrived at my apartment precisely on time, dressed in a soft blue sweater that brought out her eyes, our eyes. "Ready for this?" she asked as we got into my car. "As I'll ever be," I replied, pulling into the light weekend traffic. The drive to my parents' house in Connecticut took just under 2 hours, time filled with easy conversation and comfortable silences. It still amazed me sometimes how natural it felt to be with Julia, this woman who was simultaneously a stranger and the most familiar person in the world. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw Mom watching from the living room window. She raised a hand in greeting, her smile tentative but genuine. "Here we go," I murmured, turning off the engine. Mom met us at the door, embracing me warmly before extending a hand to Julia. "Welcome, Julia. It's good to see you again." "Thank you for having me, Margaret," Julia replied with equal politeness. The formality between them might never fully disappear, but it had softened into something resembling mutual respect. They had found a way to orbit around each other in my life without collision, a delicate balance that required constant adjustment but seemed, miraculously, to be working. Dad and Kevin were in the kitchen, the countertops covered with waffle batter, fresh fruit, and maple syrup. Kevin grabbed me in a bear hug while Dad shook Julia's hand, asking about her latest graphic design project with genuine interest. As we settled around the dining table, the same table where everything had changed 4 months ago, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. The same people, plus Julia, the same room, but everything fundamentally different. "So," Dad said after we'd filled our plates, "are you going to tell us about the DNA results?" I glanced at Julia, who nodded encouragingly. "Well, as we already suspected, I do carry the BRCA1 gene from Julia's side," I began. "I've already scheduled appointments with specialists for monitoring and to discuss preventative options." Mom's face paled slightly, but she remained composed. "Whatever you need, we're here for you." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by her support. "There's more, though." The test also found matches on my biological father's side. Kevin leaned forward, intrigued. "You found your birth father?" "Not exactly," I explained. "He died about 15 years ago. Michael Reeves. He was a musician, apparently, played guitar in local bands around Chicago." "That explains your love of music," Dad observed. "You've always had a good ear." I nodded, another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. My inexplicable ability to pick up melodies, my perfect pitch that had baffled my tone-deaf adoptive parents, one more genetic gift I'd never understood the source of. "There's something else," I continued, taking a deep breath. "He had 2 other children. I have half-siblings out there somewhere." A moment of silence fell over the table as everyone absorbed this information. "Are you going to try to find them?" Mom finally asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "Part of me wants to, but another part is still adjusting to everything that's already happened. I think I need some time." Julia reached over and squeezed my hand. "There's no rush. These connections will still be there when you're ready." I smiled at her gratefully, then turned to include everyone at the table. "The most important thing I've learned through all of this is that family isn't just about blood or genes or legal documents. It's about the connections we choose to nurture, the love we decide to give." Kevin raised his coffee mug in a toast to family, in all its complicated forms. We all clinked glasses, and for a moment, the weight of the past seemed to lift. We were just people sharing a meal, bound together by threads both biological and chosen. After brunch, Mom surprised us all by inviting Julia to see the family photo albums, the visual record of the life she'd missed. The 2 women settled on the couch, heads bent together over images of my childhood birthdays, school plays, graduations. "She always had that little furrow between her eyebrows when she concentrated," Mom was saying, pointing to a picture of me at about age 8, focused intently on building a sand castle. "Still does it now." "I do the same thing," Julia said, touching the space between her own eyebrows. "My mother used to tell me I'd get wrinkles before I was 30. Mom laughed, a genuine sound I hadn't heard much lately. I told her the exact same thing. I watched them from the doorway, this unexpected moment of connection between the 2 women who had shaped me in such different ways. It wasn't perfect, wasn't without its undercurrents of old pain and lingering resentment. But it was real, and it was healing. Dad joined me, following my gaze. "Never thought I'd see that," he murmured. "Me neither," I admitted. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when we first adopted you, I used to wonder about your birth parents. What they were like, what parts of them lived on in you. I should have pursued it more, should have pushed back against your mom's resistance." "You can't change the past, Dad," I said gently. "No," he agreed. "But we can learn from it. Kevin's thinking about starting a family soon. If they adopt, I want that child to know their story from the beginning. No secrets, no lies." The idea of becoming an aunt, to a biological niece or nephew or an adopted one, filled me with unexpected joy. Family expanding outward in new directions, creating new connections. "I'd like that," I said. Later, as Julia and I prepared to drive back to Boston, Mom pulled me aside in the hallway. "I have something for you," she said, pressing a small box into my hands. "I should have given it to you years ago." Inside was a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. When I opened it, I found 2 tiny photographs, one of my adoptive parents holding me as a baby, and one that had clearly been cut from a larger picture: Julia, young and beautiful, pregnant with me. Where did you get this? I asked, stunned. It was in the adoption file, Mom admitted. There was a larger photo of her that I kept from you. But I couldn't bring myself to destroy it completely. It was a small confession, but significant, an acknowledgement of the ways she had tried to control my narrative, and perhaps the beginning of making amends. Thank you, I said, fastening the locket around my neck. It means a lot. The drive back to Boston was quieter, both Julia and I lost in our own thoughts. The day had been emotionally intense but ultimately healing, another step in this strange journey we were navigating together. Your mom is trying, Julia observed as we crossed the state line into Massachusetts. That can't be easy for her. No, I agreed. She spent decades seeing you as a threat. Changing that perception takes time. And what about you? Julia asked. How are you feeling about everything? I considered the question carefully. Grateful, I said finally. For the truth, however complicated. For the chance to know you. Even for the hard parts, they've helped me understand myself better. Julia smiled, her eyes, my eyes, crinkling at the corners. I feel the same way. As we approached Boston, the familiar skyline coming into view, I found myself reflecting on the unexpected path my life had taken since that fateful Thanksgiving dinner. The revelation that had seemed so devastating in the moment had ultimately led to growth, to healing, to a more authentic understanding of myself and my place in the world. I dropped Julia off at her apartment with a promise to call later in the week. Back in my own space, I immediately went to my desk and opened my sketchbook. The inspiration that had been building all day flowed through my pencil onto the blank page, a drawing taking shape almost of its own accord. Two women standing on either side of a young girl, all three connected by invisible threads that wove between and around them. Behind them, shadowy figures represented generations past and future, grandparents I'd never met, half-siblings I hadn't yet found, potential children who might someday carry my genes forward. I worked until late into the night, adding color and detail, letting the image express what words couldn't quite capture. When it was finished, I sat back and studied it, feeling a sense of completion. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.